Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends. I hope you are having a lovely day today. I'm having this morning where my heart just feels so full, and I'm just so happy to be here. I'm just feeling blessed to have this business that I have and be able to reach out and share all these things with you and have the family and the home that I have, the life that I have. I'm feeling the warm fuzzies today. And I'm really excited to share today's topic with you, which is really what we're going to talk about today is such a huge factor in your marriage, happiness, and fulfillment, and you living with the warm fuzzies. And that is specifically your values in relationships, in your marriage. Your core values in your marriage matter so much. Now, in my group program, Treasured, we have been diving into our values and really seeing how important they are in so many ways to our kind of quote unquote success in our relationships. And it just made me realize that I wanted to share it here with you too. I wanted to dive into this topic of core marriage values. So let's do it. So the basic definition of values is that they're a set of beliefs or opinions that influence how you live your life, right? Another way to put that that's actually in the dictionary is they're one's judgment of what is important in life, or they're ideas that are important to you personally. And they will influence your feelings and direct your words and actions. Right? Your values lead to how, really do influence how you feel and ultimately how you show up in life, right? And everyone's set of core values is kind of unique, right? And is influenced by their own personal life experiences. What's interesting, so interesting to me, is that many of these values are absorbed unconsciously. Like your values, many of them weren't necessarily consciously chosen, right? They kind of seeped into you by osmosis, right? And for many of us, we've never actually looked at our values with a discerning eye. We've never consciously decided oh, I like this value and how it's serving me or it is serving me, or hey, this value isn't serving me when it comes to, my relationships or whatever. So one example that I've seen actually often with my clients is a value that's been internalized unconsciously, or right is a value that's been passed down from their families, from society, is the value of selflessness, which sounds so sweet, right? Or we might call this taking care of others before themselves. Right? We talked about this, how this is actually somewhat toxic to us in the episode on overcare, my recent episode on overcare. And so when I work with my clients, what happens is they oftentimes begin to see how this unquestioned inherited value, and frankly, it's an outdated value, right? That women should be selfless, right? That this value has led them to run themselves to the ground, to feel burdened, to become exhausted, to feel uncared for and unsupported, and ultimately resentful in their relationships. I see this really often with highly sensitive women, right? It can often lead to them not saying no to the people in their lives and not caring for themselves. And obviously, as I did at least one whole episode about this, like this is not conducive to a great life and a great marriage or relationship. Another kind of inherited or like, what's it called? Like unconsciously absorbed value that often doesn't serve is of modesty. So for many women, myself included in the past, this modesty or kind of this idea that we shouldn't boast or think too highly of ourselves makes it so that we are averse to even seeing where we are good, where we are successful, where we are doing great in life, right? It leads to not owning our brilliance and not allowing ourselves to feel good or proud of ourselves. So in other words, it can actually lead to us having low self-esteem, to not liking or loving ourselves because we aren't allowing ourselves to see ourselves through the lenses of approval and admiration and fondness. Yeah, and this can really take a toll on our relationships and again, everything in our lives. I've talked about this even just the last episode. I talk about like how not having self-worth can cause problems in our relationships, right? Or having low self-worth. So important to see that value and discern if actually it's one we want to keep, right? As you can see, just unconsciously internalizing other people's values isn't always great for you or your marriage. And most of us have, again, unconsciously internalized all sorts of values that actually aren't serving us. So the good, wonderful news is you can actually decide on purpose, consciously, what you want your values to be. And you can release the ones that you discover are not serving you if you want to. So today we're going to spend some time looking at your own personal values that you actually want to have and you want to live by. Ones you want to be infused into your marriage, right? Ones you want to kind of make up the fabric of you and your partner's lives together. Now, the really, really important thing here, and I see this getting confused a lot, is that what matters are your values, right? Today we're going to look at your values, not so much your partner's values, right? And as you identify your values, you'll then be able to consciously start living them even more fully into your life and when it comes to your marriage. But this is not about imposing your values on your partner. Okay, this is what I see happen a lot is it's like, oh, this is my value. You should live it, right? Now, that actually is control, which won't lead to happiness in your marriage for either one of you. And we have talked about this before on this podcast. And it's easy to fall into. So like if you hear that and you're like, ooh, I do that, right? Like I'm raising my hand too. I have totally done this. It's so easy to do, to like have these values that are actually pretty lovely. Some of our values are great, right? We like our values. And then what we do is we try to impose them. We're like, you should be like this. You should live like this, right? And that just doesn't work. That really backfires in our relationships. And not imposing our values is often, right? Not imposing our values on our partner is often one of the hardest things in our intimate relationships, right? In other words, to not impose it on our partner and to make our primary focus be on what values we live, right? And that's the key. Making your primary focus around your values be on what you bring to the table, how you live, how you relate, how much you live out what you deeply value, right? And not on how well or how poorly your partner lives out your values or even his own values. Because again, the only thing you really can ever truly control is what you bring to your marriage. But that is so much, and it's more than enough to feel good, so good in your marriage, and to feel so in integrity with your deepest values and really your essence. When you live your values, you will feel so good about yourself. Like when you're truly doing that, it feels amazing, right? So you're going to feel amazing about who you are and so solid in your skin and happy in yourself. Like, and that you'll feel like who you are is just right. And that's just one of the best things. Imagine always feeling that way. It's really one of the biggest keys to happiness in life and love. But living in that real integrity, like really living your values, that's integrity, right? Living your values like this also gives you more influence in your marriage. It will allow you to affect your partner most positively and invite his good parts out too, right? Because you're not like when you're living your values, you're no longer triggering all his like defensiveness, right? Or what we might just call his negative aspects. Living your values is often enough to influence your partner to also show up in his highest integrity. And even over time, align himself more and more with your values where they actually feel good to him, right? I've definitely seen this in my own marriage as I live my values. And side note, you do not have to be perfect at this, right? It's not like we're saying you must be 100% perfect at living your values to have influence in a positive way, right? Over your partner or just to feel good in your life. No, let's not be perfectionists, right? But let's move towards living our values more. So as I've lived my core values more and more in my marriage, I've absolutely seen my husband step into some of them as well. Because, where they feel honest and aligned with him. So in other words, by living your values yourself, right, versus expecting or demanding that he live your values first, which again, let's be honest, many of us do. I certainly have been there. By living your values yourself, you will be modeling and leading the way to a culture of respect and love and integrity and all of the values that you have in your marriage, and more of all the things you value in a love relationship. Now, of course, because your partner is his own human, his own being, right? Your partner may and likely does have some different values than you do. But in most relationships, there's going to be many places where your values overlap, or enough values that overlap to make your marriage an incredible source of like all things good in your life, or many things good in your life. And those places that your values don't overlap, actually these are places of opportunity for you. They're an opportunity for you to learn to step into your values even more deeply. Like step into deeper acceptance of differences, which I bet if you were to really pause and consider deep down what one of your values is, I bet that's one of them. Like deep accepting of another human being and who they are, right? Respect and all of that. Respect, acceptance, etc. So again, where your values don't overlap, you get to be challenged to live out even more your highest values of like love or compassion or respect or care, or like I said, acceptance of this other being, right? And I bet as a highly sensitive person, some of these or all of these are big ones for you. I've certainly working with, hundreds of highly sensitive women. I know that these are deep held values for so many of us. So where your values and your partners don't necessarily overlap, where you maybe see his values as not living up to your values, this is actually a place where you have an opportunity to grow even more into who you most want to be in your heart. So not always having tons of values overlapping is not necessarily a problem in your relationship. But as you get more and more clear about your values and you live them more and more fully, it is possible, I want to be honest here, that you will find that you do have so many values out of alignment with your partner, and so many that it's really hard to truly even want to be with him. Now, in my experience, this is very rare when we really get down to it. So that's the good news. But if it does happen, if you do find that to be the case, that's really great information to have. So you can release the relationship and move forward into your future, a future that's more in alignment for you sooner than later. But important, before you do that, there's usually some deeper work to do here first, right? This isn't just about listing your values out and seeing if they align with your partner's. Like, that's really surface level work. Most of us need to spend a fair amount of time actually deeply living our own values, like living them into the relationship for a while before we have the full information to discern where our values truly don't align with our partners. And to be able, which we'll get into in a minute, like be able to live these values is not just as simple as like, oh, I'm going to live my values now, right? There's work to do there. Oftentimes there's things to kind of what I call barriers to remove. And we'll talk about a little bit more about this in a few minutes. But it's really not as simple as like, this is my values and he doesn't seem to live them. And so we aren't a match anymore, right? Like truly, honestly, there's so much work you can do on your side of the street before it's honest and, well, truly in integrity to just be like, yeah, this isn't going to work. But once you have deeply done that work and you are so sure you've been thorough in that, of course, it can be, there are certainly times if we realize that there are too many values out of alignment, of course, like that can be a totally appropriate time to leave, and you can do so. You can say goodbye from a place of peace and, just feeling deeply good about making that choice for yourself and for the relationship. But again, most of us aren't going to find that we have too many values out of alignment, especially when we're truly living our own values and not focusing so much on his side of the street or whether or not he's living our values or he's living his values. And again, this is a lot of the work my clients and I are doing together right now, both in Treasured and my one-on-one clients. And it truly does shift things really quickly when we start stepping into living our values, right? And it shifts things for the so much better fast. And it's been so fun to watch my clients really start stepping into their values. So let's gain some traction on discovering your values that matter most in your marriage. So you can also start stepping into living your values. So this is a kind of a 4-step process. And before I dive into it, I want to let you know that I have created a copy of this, a little PDF of this that I want to give to you for free so you can really do this work for yourself. I walk you through the steps in this PDF and kind of talk about some of the same things we've been talking about here because it's just so important. Such a foundational thing to do is to evaluate and start choosing and living into your very top core values. So you can grab this PDF, Your Core Values in Marriage, at the show notes, at the link in the show notes, or you can head over to www.lifeisworthloving.com/core values. But let's go ahead and do this now. and it might be a little bit more abbreviated. So again, grab the PDF if you want a fuller list. I'm going to share a list now of a bunch of values, and then I want you to write out the top 10 that stand out from these. And I want, as you listen in, I want you to be honest in your introspection. Like, what do you actually most care about? And this is really important, don't decide based on what you think you should care about right now, but just on what you honestly do care about right now the most. And you might even think about kind of like listening with your heart instead of with your head. Yeah? So here we go. Commitment, acceptance, respect, personal sovereignty, friendship, non-judgment, honesty, love, affection, fun, communication, compassion, growth, connection, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, allyship, which I think of as being a team, togetherness, which we could call time together, independence, which we could think of as apart time, reciprocity, generosity, empowerment of oneself, of your partner, patience, consideration, play, humor, tidiness. So again, I did not give you the full list that I have on that PDF, but there's a bunch of other ones in there. And there's also more, right? You can add any of your own. This is definitely not a comprehensive list. So if there's ones that you're like, oh, she missed this, then absolutely add this. And again, this is not just like your values in all of your life. We're talking more about values in regards to your intimate relationship, things that you hold, ideas and beliefs that you hold most dear to your, that you think are most important in relationships. All right. So once you have that list written down, the next step is step 2. Consider the people you most admire. Just in general in life. Like, we admire a quality in others because it's something we value ourselves. And so list those as well, like if any are different from what you just discovered in step 1. And you might think here about like couples you admire, or someone you admire and how you've seen them be with their significant other, or even with friends, right? Or other humans. So see what comes up there. Step 3, I would like to think of this one as a bonus. And you don't necessarily have to do this one. I would actually maybe not do this one if you really feel a lot of resentment and just you're in a place where you're kind of not happy at all with your partner. This might not be the best step to do. But if that's not, like, if you're not gripped by that right now, this actually might be the very most honest, quickest way to see what you really value. But again, this is not intended. I want you to be careful because this is not intended for you to find more flaws in your partner. It's really meant to bring to light what matters to you most in a relationship, right? What you value. But if you think or you see him as lacking in certain areas that you would really love to have be more of a part of your relationship, that means you value those things. But it also doesn't mean you are living them yourself. Okay, so that's key to recognize that too. Okay, so here's step 3. Think about what your partner, or like what you wish your partner was living out more in your relationship. Like things he isn't living out as much as you'd like. Right? Like for myself, that would be the one that came top of mind right now is patience. Like I'd love to see my husband living out some more patience. or patience, like slowing down a little. And then, of course, when I notice that, I'm like, oh, I see that I could also live that out more too, right? So write those down again yourself, if there's any of those for you. And the next step 4, is just simply to choose the top 6 you most want to center your life and marriage on for now. And I randomly made up the number 6 here. You can choose a little less. I do not recommend choosing more for right now. I want you to know that choosing these 6 or less for you to focus on now, it can just be for now. It can be temporary, but it's most effective for us when we're choosing to kind of grow in an area, to kind of simplify, right? To not have too many things to focus on, because then we just can get overwhelmed or do things really shallowly and actually not make a lot of progress, right? So choose 6, maybe even just 3, and let those be like the top ones you want to focus on living out in your marriage. And then once you've chosen them, certainly write them down, right? You might even write them down in like big, bold letters somewhere to remind you. And then the work is just to focus on living them every day in your marriage, right? These are going to be like your compass to steer by, or your GPS. And I want to give you right now just a couple practical ways to do that. Because yes, you can just be like, okay, I'm going to live these more, and that can be helpful. But let's do a couple more practical things, make it a little more concrete for you. So as an example, let's just say your values, 2 of your top values were love and humor. So in a sticky situation with your partner, like something that might be kind of upsetting, or one or both of you are like not feeling great or in a little bit of conflict or whatever, or like there's some upset going on, you can ask yourself, to live your values, you can ask yourself, in this situation, how would love think? What would love do? Or what would my value of humor think here? What would humor do here? And maybe as you asked yourself these questions, and side note, you might need to take a little pause to ask yourself these questions. You might need to leave the room to ask yourself these questions, depending on what's going on, right? But maybe you'd get an answer like when it comes to the humor one, right? It's like, what would humor think here? What would humor do here? And maybe what you'd get is, the answer would be like, see the silliness of how you're caught up in your lizard brain, right? See the silliness of the situation. And then maybe you'd be able to crack a joke about yourself, which may very well lighten and lift the situation. And I actually, that has been an experience that my husband and I have definitely had. Sometimes he or I will bring humor in the middle of a kind of challenging situation, and it has this beautiful effect of diffusing things and kind of lightening the mood so we can actually resolve whatever the issue is, right? And the second kind of tip, practical way you can kind of live your values is like when things are just going fine and dandy, right? When there isn't any upset, you can simply kind of intend to infuse your thinking and your words and your gestures towards him with love and humor, right? Again, if those were your values, insert your own values there. Maybe it's respect, right? Maybe it's care. Maybe it's playfulness. But just simply intend to infuse your thoughts and your actions with those values, right? So that might look like reminding yourself here and there of your intention to live these values. Right? It can be that simple. Like my client, Catherine, she and I did an interview on this podcast. That's episode 91, How Self-Love Equals Better Communication, Catherine's story. Catherine shared a great example of doing this herself. So she shared how she will consciously choose patience and kindness every day. Like she'd actually say inside her own head as she arrived home after work every day, patience and kindness. And it really helped her to live out being so much more patient and kind, not just to her husband, but also to herself. And that is a really important point. And I want to say side point, but it's not really a side point. So I just want to talk about that here for a minute. Living your values isn't just about living them for others or, for and with your partner, right? No, it's about living them towards yourself. Not only is it great practice to live them into your relationship, but you're truly the most important. You are the truly most important person in your whole life. Like your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship you're ever going to have, right? Because there is no way you will ever not have that relationship as long as you're alive. Like you are stuck with you, my love. And so how you treat yourself, how you relate to yourself really matters and deeply affects the quality of all of your relationships. So you may even want to focus primarily on living your values with your own self. Like if your value is respect, practice respecting yourself as fully as possible. This will also hugely help you not be so upset or hurt when others don't treat you by that value of respect, right? It will help you feel respected even when others are not being respectful to you. In other words, it will help that value be there within you, be part of your life, even if other people, even if your partner isn't living that value himself. All right. Now, as you may have heard or picked up on or gotten a sense of in yourself, living our values is not always easy. And you're likely going to find a lot of places where you are not living them, both towards yourself and your significant other. Like if you're really being honest with yourself and you're really looking, once you've discovered what your core values are, and then you start like looking at your life, but like, where am I living this? Where am I not living this? You're going to find probably a bunch of areas where you're not always living them. But that is actually really a good thing to see, because then you can look at what's getting in your way of living them, right? Like if one of your values, again, is respect, and you see you're not respecting yourself or you're not respecting your partner here and there, then you can look at, well, what is it that's leading to me not respecting myself? What's making me not respect my husband or not showing up in a respectful way, not treating him respectfully? And the hint here, which we're not going to go into depth on, but it's always going to be the thing that's getting in your way from you living your values is always going to be conflicting beliefs, expectations, nervous system dysregulation, and what I call primal brain hijacks, or like the lizard brain stuff that I've talked a lot about on this podcast, and unwillingness or just not knowing how to fully feel and process your emotions. This same stuff is really always at the core of our unhappiness in our lives and marriages. So once you start seeing these things, once you discover what these things that are getting in the way, you can then readjust by addressing these things and beginning to live your values more and more. Now, addressing these things, some of that I've covered on this podcast, but this is the work that I do a lot in depth with my clients, because it's not always easy to see our own, the things that are in the way, right? Those expectations, those beliefs, that nervous system stuff, that primal brain hijacked, or the places we aren't allowing and processing emotion. We can't always see that. It's like in our blind spot, like when you're driving and you've got the blind spot. It's kind of like that oftentimes. And this is one reason why coaching is so effective, right? A coach can see what's getting in your way, the things that you are blind to. and therefore that you can't do anything about. So a coach can bring those and show you those limitations in yourself, and also helps you shift them and teaches you how to shift them for yourself. And as you are able to, get those blockages out of the way, those things that are in the way of you really living your values, and you start truly living those values, it really truly will lead to huge shifts and successes in creating the loving marriage you want with your partner. And also, equally importantly, feeling so good about your own self and how you live and experience your life. So I'm excited for you to identify these core values for yourself and start living them. And if you see that you could use some support with this, if you know that you could use some help seeing what's getting in the way of you living those values, both towards your own self and your partner, that of course is a prime focus of the work that I do with my clients. So absolutely feel free to reach out to me. I still have a spot or two opening up before the new year. So don't wait to set up the consult. At this point in my business, I have very limited spots to coach one-on-one, and they go quickly. So set up your consult today. I'll put the link in the show notes, or you can head over to www.lifeisworthloving.com and you'll find a spot that says work with me or coach with me, and you'll just click that and you'll find a spot to set up a consult. If you want to do this process more deeply of just like discovering those core values, this beginning process we went over together in this call, and you'd like that written process that has a larger list of values to really help you do this thoroughly, head over to lifeisworthloving.com/core values, or just go to the link in the show notes and you'll find it there. And be oh so well.